hoped or assumed that I would have something to say in the homily about our Black Lives Matter sign, and I thought about doing that, but I will just say more about that in the announcements. Yeah. So, the sower and the soil. As a young person, I was deeply intrigued by farming and agriculture. One of my favorite activities growing up was going to a living history park in our area to learn about the old ways of life in our region of Wisconsin, both among Native Americans and among immigrants from Europe. I was amazed that earlier peoples completely relied for sustenance on what they and their neighbors could produce from the land, as well as what they could gather, hunt, and fish. I was amazed that earlier peoples knew how to save and preserve foods, making sure they had enough to eat year round in a place with a mercilessly short growing season. I was amazed that earlier peoples knew how to fabricate the tools they needed to grow food. And I was particularly fascinated by the blacksmith's forge, where many of them were made. It seemed to me something of a miracle that the early French-speaking immigrants who settled in my region of Wisconsin had survived their early years there at all. And even more miraculous that the Native Americans had thrived for centuries before that. And all that human knowledge about how to live on and with and from the land is now sadly mostly lost or dormant. Later, after my first year of college, I spent the summer working on an organic farm. And I came to learn that summer that more than anything else, farming is all about dirt. Honoring, respecting, and loving dirt. We spent a lot of time that summer trying to improve the soil, which I found much more boring and tedious than harvesting and selling beautiful produce to adoring customers who didn't mind paying mind-bending prices for our perfect biodynamic strawberries. You see, I initially couldn't quite tell the difference between good soil and not as good soil, as a relative newbie to growing things and tending the earth. Most soil seemed more or less the same to me, but to an experienced farmer, soil quality is everything, and the differences are obvious and significant. Farmers can geek out about soil to no end, trading tips for how to improve it, and thereby also increasing plant quality, crop yield, and income. Now, I say all of this because I worry that for the uninitiated, today's parable might fall a little bit flat. This parable of the three varieties of soil with its layers of agricultural nuance might not seem all that significant. But I want to find a way for us to geek out on soil just a little bit this morning too, because as it turns out, soil has quite a lot to teach us. First, I think that we have to observe that the sower, the apparent main character in this parable, is awfully profligate with her seeds. I got in trouble for casting seeds too widely during my brief foray into farming. A more controlled application of seeds is much to be preferred. I had to learn not to be so wasteful. So why throw seeds where they wouldn't or couldn't grow? What is wrong with this sower? Why is she tossing seed every which way? We're meant, I think, to imagine the sower as God, generously casting seeds of divine life in every direction, even tossing them up in the air for the sheer joy of it. God, the sower, is no ordinary farmer, of course. Rather, Farmer God imagines that hospitable conditions where seeds will flourish exist in all kinds of places, expected and unexpected. So God just doesn't spend too much time figuring out where to plant. God just scatters life everywhere, willy-nilly. Nevertheless, the seeds that God sows don't seem to flourish equally everywhere. So the question, of course, arises quite quickly. Is it simply inevitable that some soil will be rocky and that some soil will be overrun with thorns and weeds? Is this just how things are? Or can difficult, troublesome soils ever become places where new life can really take root? Of course, long agricultural experience demonstrates that soils can indeed be improved. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of patience, and sometimes quite a bit of wisdom about when to intervene and when to leave things well enough alone. The best of all soil structures, I've learned, is soft and crumbly, with aggregates that hold together well. Soil structure can also be blocky or platy, columnar, or even structureless, such as a single grain sand or a massive clay soil. None of these are ideal for growth. A lot of what makes soil more or less good has to do with how water is able to move through it. A sandy soil will have good drainage, but less water and nutrient holding capacity than a clay soil. Clay soils can be hard to work and slow draining, but will be more effective at holding water and nutrients for plant roots to take up. Indeed, soils aren't inherently bad or good. Rather, what's more important is that the person working the soil needs to know and understand what they're starting with, so that they can better work with what they've got. And doesn't that have a ring of deeper truth? If you know what you've got, you'll know what you still need. But that's not really our way as humans, is it? We're not really trained to look closely and compassionately at the truth of ourselves and our communities, and to discern what inputs we might need to be more balanced, more integrated, to experience more wholeness. We're more accustomed to denying or hiding our limitations, hoping that no one notices, hoping they won't impede us too badly, hoping we can get by anyway. But it's not quite a whole life living this way, is it? No one blames soil for having too much sand, too much clay. It's not a moral failing. But for so many of us, there's failure in admitting that we're not perfect. We don't have it all together, that we could use some help, some improvement even. And as with so many things in the Christian life, what we usually need to balance us out are other people. And not other people just like us. Rather, we need people who are quite different. Sand, silt, clay. The best kind of soil, which is called loam, is a combination of all three of these in roughly equal proportions. Sand, silt, clay. The different sized particles leave spaces in the soil for air and water to get all the way down to the roots. Loam is well aerated soil, not too granular, not too solid, porous and absorbent in equal measures. Soil that's open to nourishment, retaining just enough and letting the rest go. There's something deep and significant to this soil business, isn't there? So what kind of soil are you? And what kind of soil are we? We're being invited, I think, to become the kind of soil together where God's word can truly take root and flourish. But we need one another to make this happen. Sand, silt, and clay together. It takes all three of these to create loam, the soil type most conducive to growth. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. So let us hear and understand. Let anyone with ears listen. Amen.
John, it's time for our choral anthem.
For our anthem today, we're going back to 2011 when the choir performed William Dawson's wonderful spiritual arrangement, Ain't That Good News.